Today I'm excited to be interviewing Stuart Gelb, President of the Liquidity Source, a trusted financial advisor in the commercial real estate space. We're going to be taking a deeper look into how to determine if you should be purchasing a commercial property. Recently, the Liquidity Source published an ebook outlining the secrets to commercial real estate financing. It's excellent. A simple read that outlines the critical items to consider when making the decision to purchase commercial real estate. One of the aspects was Capex Work. Can you tell us about a client or an experience that you may have had where Capex Work affected the purchase price?
Sure, that's a great question. So, just by Capex Work for definition is additional work that you're going to have to use in order to fix that building and put it into the shape that it needs to be. And depending on where you are in the chain of, are you a developer or are you a large investor that's been doing this for years? But a lot of guys, it could be simply that I've met that may want to do a medical office or want to, move their office and own a property, may not be aware of these different things like CapEx and how important it is. So when they go and look at a building, of course, the first thing that they look at from the brochure is the net operating income to make sure that the valuation for that property is there. And then they may go out and further check and find out other properties in the area of similar size, of similar rents, and it all looks nice and neat and everything's fine. And then they're approached possibly by somebody that says, maybe you should hire an engineer and just make sure that all the things in the property are 100%. The guy may say, I don't know if I want to spend the money. Could cost me a few $1,000s just to find out what. I think, the rent's good. It's a great property. So let's talk about that. So I had an experience where a gentleman was buying a building for $4 million and the net operating income was great. So there was no issue at all with that. But when he went further to check, he found out that there was a problem in the parking lot. And then he found out that some things that needed to be fixed were 8 or 10 years old. It could be a boiler, it could be a roof, it could be all kinds of additional expenses, which will, in this point out, it's additional CapEx work. So in this vein, it was maybe $500,000 of needed work because of all these old things that needed to be done to put the place in shape. You cannot look at the property and say, I'm paying $4 million for that property. I'm paying $4.5 million for the property because I have to include all the CapEx work to make this building be in the shape that it needs to be in order to move forward. That's very important, and it's worthy to note that fact to make sure it's checked. Now, for the average guy, they may not know this, but these are the type of things that I think when you have a trusted advisor, you have somebody that's really involved in the real estate and understands all the necessities. These are the type of things that we would be pointing out to make sure that your purchase price is in line with all costs, which includes capital expenditures.
So you mentioned hiring an engineer. Can you break down the process that you should go through when estimating the CapEx work? Is there a particular team you should build around yourself? What advice can you give to perhaps a developer or a new investor who's looking at these properties?
Well, if you're a new investor, so you have probably limited knowledge of who to go to. So if you were working with someone like us, and we would be your trusted advisor, we would make sure that you went to somebody that was really strong in that area to make sure that the reports and all the due diligence was done in such a way that you could rely on the facts of what he's giving, which is always important, right? Because you could always hire the wrong person and not get the right proper facts. So that's the kind of thing that we do. So I think it's important to spend a few extra dollars just to make sure, because really at the end of the day, you're spending a few extra dollars, but then you can go back and renegotiate the deal.
Right.
And therefore you might have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars just purely because of the knowledge.
That's so cool to see that you can kind of almost negotiate your purchase price in order to accommodate for the work, just because because you had the person come in and see everything.
Absolutely.
So having a trusted advisor when purchasing a property seems like the natural solution to these types of situations. Can you tell us more about how you work with your clients to achieve optimal financing for their commercial properties?
Okay, so on the financing end, specifically putting the CapEx to the side for the moment, because we look at all aspects. We would check, for example, do due diligence on all the expense items, make sure they're in line, not just what they say on the brochure, but what they say, and make sure that these are actually the expenses, right? They may have given you real estate taxes from 3 years ago. We don't really know. We want to make sure that all that's proper. And then we would check and make sure, especially now in the pandemic time, that all the rents that are coming in, are they being paid? I mean, that sounds like ridiculous because years ago you wouldn't even think about that. So we would make sure that if it was a broker involved, they would have to do a presentation of the back and front of all checks to make sure those rent rolls were the same. We'd also check all the leases. Just because it says that the lease is due in 2025, the lease may be due in 2022. I mean, who would know? Just because it's listed is not the answer. And then there's other things that we've found. We found leases on a deal recently where there was additional problems with like Verizon, like they had a cell or something on the building that they had a right of first refusal. I mean, imagine that. Imagine not knowing that, putting down the deposit, going through everything, and then when you go to the closing table, you find out that you have to first write out to get non-disturbance agreements and everything else. You need full disclosure. So you might as well use an expert here because at the end of the day, it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money.
It's almost like you get to have stress-free purchasing. You don't have to worry about it. You're taking care of all those elements for your clients.
And I think the only reason we know what to do is because you do so much of it, you become very seasoned, just like any other business. So it's really important.
Thank you, Stu, so much for joining us today here at WorkSmart. For our viewers, Stu is offering a free copy of his ebook, The Secrets to Commercial Real Estate Financing, when you book your first consultation with him and outline your financing needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.